Welcome back, everybody, to Hoops HD.
Woohoo!
It is Monday night, January 30th, a little after 9 p.m. Eastern. That means it's time for the Hoops HD Report. I'm your host, Chad Sherwood, joined by a whole giant cast here. To my sides up top, we've got David Griggs and John Titel. In the center square, we have John Stalika. To his sides, we've got Joey Fortson, Brian Black back with us for the first time in a while. Down at the bottom, we got Rocco Miller joining us from Bracketeer.org again. First of all, Brian, I think it's the first time you've been on all season, and you and Rocco are both sporting shirts. Rocco with his FAU shirt that he got in the mail and was posting all over Twitter, correct?
Nice.
Go Owls, baby.
And Brian, how you doing too? Because we haven't spoken to you all season.
I'm doing great. Much better now than I have been the last couple of weeks. So it's been a much better time. And again, been looking forward to coming back on the podcast. So hopefully can be on here as much as I can going forward the rest of the season.
That'd be awesome. And I give a shout out to your Twitter feed also. It's at 363 jerseys for hope, correct? With the number 4. Is that?
I actually changed it to CBB jerseys for hope. Because the reason being, in order to keep the check mark or whatever on Twitter, I had to keep a static name, at least for now. So I just chose that one because the number of teams keeps changing, on an annual basis.
Right. And Brian, where's awareness for epilepsy and with all the jerseys and all the tweets. So definitely follow him and check out all the jerseys he has. And if you're a school that has not sent him one yet, send him one right now.
It's less than 100 left. That's it.
All right.
Okay. All right. On that note, though, we do want to get to what's been going on, but I guess actually before we even get to the games and everything, there was a little bit of sad news here in college basketball. As somebody who grew up following the NCAA tournament, watching the games, Billy Packer, who was the voice of the Final Four for many, many years, and I know that there were a lot of people that were not huge fans, perhaps of some of his stuff, but he was the voice of the Final Four, the color commentator. Him and Jim Nantz forever, I think. He did sadly pass away this week. So, any of you have any thoughts on him?
He was the voice of the Final Four.
I love how all of us break into something at once. Sorry, go ahead.
I'll weigh in on Packer at least as it relates to the modern era of NCAA TV. Back in the mid-'70s, when NBC was carrying the NCAA tournament, Packer was usually paired with Dick Enberg and Al McGuire, and the last national championship game he covered for that network was Indiana, North Carolina. But when he went to CBS back in 1982, he came up with concepts like the NCAA selection show and the road to the Final Four, because CBS did not have experience covering college basketball at that time, and Packer was a valuable asset to the network. So a lot of things that the average fan probably isn't going to comprehend today, but I know if you grew up in ACC country, the days of Thacker and Packer, he will be missed.
Yeah, he will be. It is a shame. It's a real shame. But I want to get into what was going on the court, and we like to start our shows with a little blind resume. So I figured that'd be a good place to start. You guys may figure these two out pretty quickly. If you do, let's just have a little discussion about it before we reveal teams, and then I'll go and see if we can't figure it out. But I've got a couple of blind resumes up here, and they're a pair of pretty good ones. And really the question here, and Rocco, let me start with you on this one today, is which resume do you like better, the left or the right?
Okay. Well, I always start with road wins, Chad.
Yeah.
So I like the 2 road wins in quad 1A on the right. But at the same time, there's a lot less calories on the right in terms of wins at the top. So maybe just the sum of the parts over there on the left might be enough. If you take a look at some of the advanced metrics, looks like an extremely
favor the left there. Yeah.
Yeah. Second best offense. I'm guessing that might be Marquette. But maybe not, because I think they went up to number 1 and they don't have that many wins. So I think I'm wrong about that. But I guess just with that many wins on the left, without going deeper, I'll stick with the left.
Look at a couple of opinions here. Titel, do you agree with him on the left?
So I'm leaning more to the right because of a couple things. I'm a bit of a home court hero. I get it, 12-0, but like great record, plenty of wins in tier 1 and tier 2 and tier 3. Not that I have anything against all the tier 1 on the left. but the tier 2 loss on the right is hurt a little. The giveaway for me, and I will not share it, is the score of the second game in tier 1, because that's one of the most unusual scores we've seen all year.
Yeah, that might be a bit of a
And
giveaway.
there is a tiebreaker if you look very closely, in that the net of the one team on the left is 13, and the team on the right beat number 13 in the net. And that gives me, this is a very close call, and I think I give it, because of that win head to head, team on the right.
I don't want to do too much of a giveaway right here.
I agree.
Okay,
I like the team on the
Stalika, go
right.
ahead and tell me.
Well, no, Chad, let me reveal it.
Well, I want to ask Stalika first who he thinks they are, then we'll get to
Okay,
reveal
yeah,
the
but
second.
I will reveal this.
Okay,
I
first of all,
promise I will not reveal the answers, but I
Go
will
ahead,
give
Stalika.
a hint. I think that tier 2 loss is going to end up being a tier 3 loss by year's end.
Okay. Well, first of all, Stalika, did you have a guess?
I will take the team on the right.
No, I mean, do you have a guess as to who these two teams are?
Baylor and Kansas State.
Baylor on the left, or you think Baylor on the left and Kansas State on the right? Well,
Yes.
Griggs, I'm going to go to you here, but Griggs,
Okay.
I have a special feature though. I'm going to give you a little bit more help here because I know you know it's difficult for you. So, Griggs, do you know which team is which?
Yes, that would be Washington State on the left and Utah Valley on the right.
Oh, you're very, very close, Griggs.
That is correct. Yes.
Yeah, no, it is. Of course, it is Baylor on the left, K-State on the right here.
Well, you gotta admit that I was close. The resumes are confirmed.
And Brian, let me ask you this, because this Baylor team, I think, is almost, it's almost very quietly, really putting together a heck of a resume there. I mean, and very almost quietly won 6 in a row. It's kind of funny.
I mean, like, that's the thing, is like, you never know with teams, and it's all about how the schedule stacks up too, and coming up, they got opponents, they got, was it 5 road games left? So they got to play Texas. They got at Texas. They got an easier game coming up, ideally against Texas Tech. But I mean, they're still, 69th in the net, so they're still good too. They've compiled a good resume. I know that all the losses are tier 1. So I mean, they don't have any T2, T3, T4 losses at all. So I mean, that what you see is a pretty solid team there. I mean, the Big 12 is, I don't know. We can't base things off of previous seasons. I like to use the eye test way too much, and I'm guilty of it. But when I watch both Baylor and Kansas State, it is so, more often than not, I really feel like it would be pretty even. Even though no matter what the score may show for one game, the next game, I feel like the strategies would be changed. They just feel so evenly matched to me, especially, on various different courts, what have you.
Yeah, and Joe, you mentioned this, that they played head to head. Kansas State won at Baylor by 2 points.
Yeah,
but I just look at what Baylor did non-conference with UCLA and Gonzaga there. I mean, those are two incredible scalps to have. And that's why I think this Baylor team is close to a 1 seed right now. Would you be with me on that?
I wouldn't go. I think the thing is, there is a mess of teams that are all grouped together. I think Baylor, for the extent of the season, has mainly been a 4 seed since the preseason, and they have climbed their way up now well into the 3 line. I don't know if you just got to add up the teams that are with them. I mean, there are so many teams, fellow Big 12 teams like Kansas State, but also Tennessee getting a win. I don't think Texas should get punished too much for it. The 2 Pac-12 schools. I mean, there are a lot of teams that, are competing for the 1s and the 2s. Right now, I actually do have Baylor still as a 3, but man, it's, as they said in the old radio days, with a bullet.
Okay. And I didn't say that they're actually the 1. I think that they're closer to a 1, maybe closer to a 1 than a 4 right now is kind of where I was going with this.
I think I'd split the difference and put them in a 2. I'd put them at the last 2 probably right now.
Okay.
I kind of wanted to make a point real quick here, Chad, as we're looking at the standings. We've been routinely putting 6 teams from this league as protected seeds. And right now, those 6 teams are separated by 1 game. As they continue to play each other and as things play out, I know we're halfway through. I think by the end of the year, if things, unless it just continues to eat itself, it'll be a little more clear. But if Baylor is the first place team when all this is over, and
Oh,
right now they're only a game back, if they win the night and they finish in first, yeah, I think they get a 1. I think whoever
course.
finishes in first place is getting a 1.
Okay.
I agree.
Let's get into the games that were played this weekend. Rocco, it was Big 12 SEC week, and the Big 12, as expected, won. Maybe only 7-3 instead of 8-2 was maybe the surprise here. But great performances by K-State with a win over Florida, Kansas with a win at Kentucky, Baylor with a win over Arkansas. We could just keep going here.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah, I mean the challenge definitely favored Big 12. To only 2 road wins, to only 2 road teams got wins in the entire series, and that of course was Kansas at Kentucky, and sort of meaningless but also meaningful for metrics. Texas Tech did win at LSU. That was the second. I think TCU probably would have been fine, but tragic news where Mike Miles goes down 4 minutes into the game at the hump. Mississippi State ends up winning in overtime. Give TCU a ton of credit for hanging in there and getting that thing to OT, but they just couldn't get the win. So we'll see what that does to the Frogs here in the next couple of weeks. Great news on Miles, just a hyperextension, so they could get him back within a couple of weeks. But that's a tremendous opportunity for a team under the microscope. West Virginia Mountaineers, I'll just comment on them. On the very fringes of the bubble, got a great win over Auburn in the challenge, and now get a chance to sweep TCU in Fort Worth. TCU will be down not only Miles, but another starter tomorrow. Mountaineers got to get that one because it's tough sledding the rest of the way for anybody not in the top 4 of this league or 5.
Yeah. And Titel, I know you had some thoughts of the Mountaineers too while we're on them.
Well, not anymore, but no,
Okay.
I think Rocco covered it all. But in closing, doesn't get any easier. Each of their next 5 games are against top 40 teams in Ken Palm. 3 of those 5 were on the road.
Yeah, and that's the that's the amazing story. One of the better wins here, actually, with West Virginia. We even mentioned that beating Auburn. Stalika, what about when we look at teams like Oklahoma and Oklahoma State both pick up the win, and Oklahoma's win over Alabama, even though it was at home, 93-69, one of the shockers of the weekend.
When you beat Alabama by 24, I don't care where the game is played. You have to give the Sooners a lot of credit for this one. You can only hope it would translate to a couple more wins for the Sooners in conference play, because that will be an ace of the hole if they're going to be tied with other bubble teams that are going to be in consideration in a few weeks.
Yeah, we're sitting here looking at a team that's in 9th place in the conference, 12-9 overall, Joby. But you got to say the Oklahoma's right there on the bubble, if not in with the Alabama.
Yeah, win. I think because of their overall record, they still need they need to finish Big 12 play out solidly. They can't just if you're only 1 game over 500, you're not getting in this thing. So they gotta still win games. And guess what? If they win those games, because it's the Big 12, they're going to be like that Vanderbilt team from about 4 or 5 years ago, that when they finally climbed enough games above 500, they weren't just in the play-in game in Dayton. They made it all the way to either an 8 or 9 seed. That is what Oklahoma is looking ahead of itself. They're either going to be an 8 or 9 or they're out.
And Griggs, let me ask you about one more team here, and that's the Cyclones. This was the surprising loss by the Big 12 conference in the challenge here. I think Missouri thought they were still in the Big 12 by winning that game, but they go to Mizzou and lose by 17 points. A team that had been playing so well going into that game.
Yeah, I was surprised for 2 reasons. One was how well Ohio State had been playing, and 2, while we had been
Iowa State.
Oh my God!
Ohio State is not playing well. Trust me.
Oh, geez. Well, yeah, how well the Cyclones were playing, and how we had been putting Missouri in our fields, but that's only because the rules say you have to take 68. I mean, Missouri had not looked impressive really at any point all year, at least not when they'd played other tournament caliber teams, and certainly not protected seeds. But my God, Missouri just blew their doors off. I think that was as surprising to me as anything that happened in the whole challenge, minus maybe Oklahoma blasting Alabama to the moon.
Yeah,
but still, when you assess, I mean, that's 1 game out of the 30-ish that they'll play. This is still a very good profile.
Yeah, and Rocco, as I transition to the SEC, which is where we'll go next year. Oh, actually, let me before we get to Missouri, let me quickly go through the upcoming schedule here in the Big 12, where as we record this, we've got Baylor, Texas, Iowa State, Texas Tech. As far as the rest of the games worth watching on this from this week, as we've said every week, just circle every single one of them. I don't know that there's not one here that doesn't stand out as
how
just
big
a great
is
game.
Bedlam on Wednesday? Jeez.
Bedlam round 2, Oklahoma State
Yeah.
already having won the first round of that. But you got K-State, Kansas, you got West Virginia, TCU, you got Texas, K-State, you got Kansas, Iowa State, you got Texas. I mean, we just go on and on and on.
Better enjoy Bedlam while it lasts.
Yeah, I know. Oh, don't.
But Rocco, as I was going to say here, as I go over to the SEC, we started to mention this Missouri team. I'll bring their profile back up here. And this is a team that I was kind of like holding my nose at, but said there was nothing bad. So they were a tournament team, even though it was a home win. I think that what happened this weekend over Iowa State suddenly made me believe in this team.
It was a convincing win, and it was actually perfect for what the Tigers were missing. They were really hurting big time in a lot of the metrics, the net even itself. And a 17-point win against a top 15 team does wonders for all of those numbers. So they all got back into a comfortable selection zone. Missouri's already got some of the good wins. So they're now able to go back into SEC play where they're going to face some wars. I think the jury's still out about the Tigers in terms of what they can do on the road. Their only 2 true road wins are down there in Quad 2B. I think that's an important box they'll need to check. And there's not as many, even though Missouri's been in the SEC for a while now, there's just not as many road opportunities in the SEC because about half the league is outside of the field.
And when we look at some more at these standings here, and the results from this past weekend. Well, Brian, let me go to you here. You still have Alabama, despite the loss, is still 8-0 in the conference. You got Tennessee and A&M up there. What are you liking out of this conference so far? Oh, sorry, Brian.
I feel like Alabama. I don't know what it is. I feel like Tennessee might be just a smidgen better regardless. And when I look at Alabama, the thing is, they have the 3 losses, and you got the 2 losses, or the 3 losses with UConn, Gonzaga, and Oklahoma. So I mean, those are 3 really forgivable losses. But at the same time, you got Tennessee. And when we're looking at them, again, I look at losses a lot because I just kind of look at how well was the team prepared if you screwed up. But the game against Colorado isn't too bad either. Colorado, though, is a team that has struggled somewhat. I don't know. The wins that I like for Tennessee, though, in this case, I think it's very close to splitting hairs because I know we got the J&G has Alabama at 2. While he's got Tennessee at 6. But from what I've seen, I feel like, and then Tennessee also has, they've got a schedule in front of them. They got to play at Kentucky still. They got to play some games against decent teams. So, they got number 4 team Alabama. They still got to play again too. So those games they got ahead of them, they'll build that resume. I think it's really close though.
Tennessee really looked impressive at home, and they've looked impressive at home all year. And they play Alabama once, and it's at Tennessee. So as far as who's going to finish on top and maybe have the edge, that's a big game.
It is. And Titel, you did a bracket this week that you and I don't think it was a mistake. Put Mississippi State in and Texas A&M out. And I want to give you a chance to address the fact that you had a 7-1 team in the SEC out while a 1-7 team in the same league was in.
Number one, it was not a mistake. Although if they lose to South Carolina on the road on Tuesday, then adios. No, I mean, losing at Georgia and to Drake anywhere, although neutral site is not great. Every other loss is top 50, including several on the road. No shame in losing to Tennessee twice and Alabama once. Marquette, Utah, TCU, they got plenty of trophies in the closet for those wins. And with SEC play still ahead, Arkansas, Kentucky, they got plenty of chances. I understand that if they finish 6 games below 500, that's a huge red flag, but I'm willing to give them the benefit of the doubt because the win over TCU, even with an injured Miles, was very impressive to me.
But why not Texas A&M then?
Well, there's a little team I like to call Wofford, Chad.
Okay.
That's
So
all.
it's what happened on December 20th that's keeping them out right now. Then, in your opinion,
I mean,
I don't think you're wrong. I
Texas-
actually agree 100% with you. But it was just one of the crazier things I've seen where a team that's 6 games over is out, while a team that's 6 games under is in.
It
Yeah,
is crazy, which is why if you just focus on conference records, it doesn't
Yeah.
make any sense. But I think you have to drill down a little more.
Yeah, like we've heard over and over the speculation, does the committee look at conference records or don't they? What you're saying here is that you do not believe they do.
I'm saying that Mississippi State is a terrible shooting team on offense, but under Chris Jans, they play amazing defense, and they've had a very difficult schedule and lost to a bunch of good teams. They do have a couple wins. And I mean, if Kentucky blows them out on February 15th at home by 30, like, yeah, there's no way I'll have them above Kentucky. But I was really impressed by the TCU win.
I think the other side of the coin in Mississippi State is, yes, you lost 4 games against Tennessee and Alabama, which means you better be beating Florida and Georgia. And you certainly, well, at least they beat Ole Miss, so at least they completely disgraced themselves. 15-6 would be a lot different than 13-8 right now. I'll just
Their
leave it at
next
that.
4 are very winnable. So
Well, the Missouri home game, not so much. The game at Arkansas, not so much. Well, maybe. This Arkansas team
Arkansas better turn themselves.
Yeah,
check
Arkansas
themselves
going
before
the
they
wrong
wreck
direction.
themselves. Yeah.
Joby, I want to ask you about one other team, and that is Kentucky.
Yeah.
I mean, hey, according to the metrics, at least, losing to Wofford and losing to South Carolina is the same. It's a quad 4 loss at home. So if we're going to, is that why we're keeping? Is that why people are keeping Kentucky out as well?
I mean, no. I think Kentucky's in this field right now.
Okay.
I think they're in this field. They're in the field in bracket matrix. They're in my field. John, are they in your? I can't remember if they're in your field.
2 weeks ago, yes, but I had them out and being replaced by a team like Mississippi State, which David was not a fan of, I can assure you. But
Yeah,
no, I just found it curious.
No, I would have Kentucky have Mississippi State, but Kentucky is this seems to happen on an annual basis with both Kentucky and North Carolina, who we might get to, is for some reason they just whether it's not getting their defense right or et cetera, Calipari takes a little while to gel his teams. He just does. And the fact is they do have the returning player of the year in Tshiebwe. This Kentucky team is starting to find themselves. They didn't get blown out by this Kansas team is a 2 seed or a 1 seed or, et cetera. There's no shame even losing in Rupp to Kansas by 5 or whatever it was. I mean, it was a nice tight game.
9.
It was a tight game throughout. Throughout the game. Right. And it was in doubt with a minute to go. And the fact of the matter is Kentucky is finding themselves. They need to continue to win, but I think they're in the field right now. Yes, they have a beautiful win, one of the best wins in the country sitting on their resume, and they need to fill it out more. But that win alone shows that they can beat anyone, anywhere.
Yeah.
You got. I was just gonna say you got to look at their upcoming schedule too.
Yeah.
Everybody's either a home game or a road game against a team that's either right on the bubble or out right now. That means every game left should be winnable for them. Which is
that's the point I was about to make, Chad.
Sorry.
Before you just interrupted me.
Well, that's why I said it.
That's the point I was about to make.
Okay. Let's bring. I'll let you go first as we go to the next conference. So let's jump over. Let's take a look at the upcoming schedule.
Yeah, the upcoming schedule.
The Big 12.
It's a big week here.
Go ahead, Griggs. Your thoughts on it?
Well, TAMU Arkansas tomorrow is very, very, very bubblicious. I know that, I like the way Texas A&M is playing now. I realize that you have to look at the whole profile, and when you do, there's a very good case for not selecting them. But the way they're playing now, they have the opportunities that they need to get selected, and it starts tomorrow. Arkansas, at the same time, is sort of sinking into the quicksand. So that's I think that's one of those bubblicious games. The rest of the week.
Well, I think it's a big week for Tennessee. The highlight game, I
Yeah.
think, here is Saturday's Auburn Tennessee game.
I think that's a big mismatch. I think Tennessee's really good and Auburn is not.
All right, fair enough. Okay, let's run things. Let's run over to the Big Ten though, and Salika, let me start off with you, where Purdue is now 21-1 overall, picks up a win at Michigan and a win over home over Michigan State. Now the number one team in both polls. I think they were last week as well, but and started to get the number one in a lot of the metrics is also.
Purdue is starting to run away from the rest of the conference right here. The game at Michigan screamed a bit of trap, but they were able to hold off the Wolverines, and they did not walk the tightrope against Michigan State after getting a close win up in East Lansing. I guess the other question is, who's going to catch them right now? Indiana just might be sneaking up into that 2 spot.
Indiana might be sneaking up. Brian, what do you think about the Hoosiers this year? They cracked into the top 25 polls this week, back again for the first time in a while.
So I love Indiana. First off, I'm a sucker for the state of Indiana. I'd love to move there one day. And I know some people scratch their heads at that one, but I actually would really love to check it out. And I think that, to be honest, I really like Indiana. Their worst loss is to Northwestern. That's pretty forgivable. I mean, they're 15-6 overall, 20 in the net. They got wins at Illinois, at Xavier. So I mean, those are good wins. And they've taken care of business against the teams they needed to. I like them, and they don't have a lot of landmines left. I guess Michigan's probably the biggest landmine they got left a couple times. So,
well, they got Purdue twice.
Other than that,
that's not a landmine, though. I agree with him. It's not a landmine. That's
right.
a expected loss.
If you lose to Purdue, you're not dropping
versus Purdue. If Indiana somehow splits versus Purdue, they're fantastic. They got a decent chance of getting a relatively high seed.
Yeah.
But again, they got to take care of business versus Michigan and not screw up. And obviously winning one of those 2 games versus Purdue would be massive.
And Rocco, I want to ask you about a team that's heading in the wrong direction. I still like their profile, but a lot of people don't. And that's the Wisconsin Badgers here, now with 3 straight losses.
All right, so Wisconsin, what do we have?
Will we lose Rocco?
No, I'm here.
Okay, yeah.
So I'm Wisconsin, Chad. I think it's just a situation like we see every year in a couple of these very elite leagues. I think it's really a Big 10 and Big 12 problem every once in a while. An SEC problem where they're going to straddle that 500 line. And right now, I mean, I have them barely out of the field, probably one of the first couple teams out. And it's mainly, just an unbalanced situation. You look at the top 3 quads, they're 7 and 8. The top 2 quads, they're 6 and 8.
I get it, Rocco, yep. but don't they have 2 road wins against tournament teams, 5 overall wins against tournament teams, and no losses to anybody that's not at least on the board? Wake Forest lost, that's probably a team that's out, but everyone else is in.
They do, but I think you still need to be closer, either at 500 or I think you should at least be at 500. They're below now. It's a sum of parts with the losing versus just it's outweighing the great wins right now. Just because you got to be at least a 500 average team in those 15 opportunities. We're going all the way down to the 3rd quadrant in that example. That's my opinion. I think it also is backed up by their net being in the mid 70s. That's not a deterrent. Rutgers, as you know, mid 70s last year, went to Dayton, won a game. But I could see Wisconsin throwing in Dayton right this second. I'm not saying
I love you giving us that win in Dayton last year that we didn't get, but I really appreciate it.
And I've all season Wisconsin's net's a joke. Wisconsin's net is a joke. That it shows that the net isn't everything it's cracked out to be. When I see Wisconsin behind now almost 6 Mountain West teams, give me
the Mountain West. We're going to get to that in a minute.
Top 30 and 40 ranked behind the Mountain West. Come on.
The Mountain West is almost
St. Mary's. St. Mary's is a 2 seed. Like St. Mary's, not as a 2 seed.
I think the Mountain West could put 6 teams in the Elite 8. We'll get to that later.
Titel, the Northwestern Wildcats. I brought them up here on the right. Talk about another hot team along with Indiana in this conference.
3-0 last week, beat the Badgers and the Huskers and the Golden Gophers. Sole second place in the conference I have them as a 10 seed. They cannot rest on their laurels with a bubblicious game at Iowa coming up Tuesday. There are few teams in the nation who rely on their senior backcourt more than Coach Chris Collins relies on our good friend Boo Booey and Chase Audige. But if those New York guards can keep scoring and passing, this team might make only their second tournament appearance in school history.
Well, and this team here, they played 3 games last week because of their COVID adjournments. They've got 3 more this week. I mean, that's 6. You normally play 2 games a week, and now you get 6 games in 2 weeks. So real tough stretch here with this game in Iowa coming up to start this off this week too. But go ahead, Griggs. Who did you want to discuss? You want to discuss one other team here?
I think we hit everybody. I would not like to discuss Ohio State. Let's just keep moving. And I was just excited about the games this week because there's a couple in particular that are awesome. So I thought that's what we were going to.
Okay, so we'll go out to the games this week. We didn't have time here to discuss. Rutgers had a 1 in 1 week. Penn State had a 1 in 1 week.
Yeah. Those are, I like this Penn State team. I realize they're kind of straddling the bubble. So every game they're sort of clinging to it by their fingernails, but I would love to see them get in.
They got to go to Purdue on Wednesday, and then they got a must-win game at Nebraska on Sunday. Meanwhile, Rutgers,
landmine game.
my Scarlet Knights have Minnesota at home on Wednesday. They better win that. And then at Madison Square Garden for Michigan State on Saturday, it's the Rutgers home game got moved there, so that's a bit of a tough.
Illinois is on a nice little run. You mentioned Wisconsin. The other end of that was that Illinois took them out, and so give Illinois.
Let's talk about them really quick because they are playing really well all of a sudden. The Illini are. Yeah.
And I think the result is Illinois might have climbed back to the front of that Big Ten group that's fighting like right now for a 5 seed.
Yeah, and what are they? I think they've won
teams, whether it be Indiana, Iowa, Indiana premature, Rutgers. There's a lot of those, Michigan State, and Illinois starting to bubble to the front of that group, along, as Brian pointed out, Indiana.
Yeah, and what if they won 6 out of 7? And they've just been sort of quietly playing really well. You look at them now, and you're like, wow, that's good.
And by the way, they have neutral court wins over UCLA and Texas that they got back in November, December. So hey,
Illinois hot right now.
Here's the rest of the upcoming schedule. Include the Purdue at Indiana game. That's probably the big highlight one on Saturday. Although also Illinois at Iowa, Rutgers, Michigan State. Big rivalry game, Ohio State at Michigan, that nobody's going to care about. And I thought going into the season, we would have been circling that game too, which is crazy. Joby, I know you may not want to go there. Brian's wearing the shirts, but let's go to the ACC, where your Virginia Cavaliers found a way tonight to win at Syracuse, and just found a way is all I can say.
Yeah. Hey, if you're playing Virginia, run a zone. Virginia decided to break the zone by putting 5'2" Kihei Clark in the middle. That's kind of a non-traditional way to do it. Yeah, sure, he can pass, but trying to get the ball through those big, tall arms was like remarkable. Virginia, this is a big win for Virginia in this for this reason. Virginia gets Clemson at home eventually later, and the one game that the two will meet. Virginia, thus, I think, should win that game and thus would have the advantage to try to get that 1 seed. Virginia needs to miss landmines. Another landmine we'll talk about is this Saturday at Virginia Tech. But Virginia, I think, still has the inside track to the regular season ACC 1 seed / title as we go. And I'm sure others will talk about the absolute heart that I see out of the Clemson Tigers, even missing their point guard. Clemson keeps coming. You got to give entering the season, if you listed top 10 coaches on the hot seat in Power 5, Brad Brownell is definitely on it and might be near the top. Well, congratulations, Brad Brownell. Barring a collapse, you are not on a hot seat, but instead a Coach of the Year award.
Boston College better watch out.
Let me say here, Rocco, this Clemson team, I pulled them over the right here. They're nationally ranked. But when you look a little deeper in their profile, I see 2 Tier 4 losses, which you already know from earlier in the show. 1 Tier 4 loss knocks you out of the tournament, according to Titel. You got twice as many as that, Rocco. And there's, I'm looking for the great win at Pitt. Is that a great win? I just don't see it there. So is this if Clemson had blown this game against Florida State that they should have on Saturday, they might be on the bubble right now, wouldn't they?
Yeah, and I mean they're not that far above, honestly. They got 2 quad 4 losses right now. So it's and they lost by 18 to Loyola Chicago. They can't get rid of that. Loyola Chicago only has 1 Atlantic 10 win, and we don't even talk about that league in this show anymore. But I'll say this, like the ACC is a 15-team league. I think that's important to call out because everybody's schedule is completely unbalanced in one way or the other. Clemson hasn't played the meat of their schedule. I give them a ton of credit. Like Joby said, they deserve that. 10-1 is hard to do no matter what 11 games you played in this league. But coming up, they'll get the 3 hardest teams all on the road. Actually, they won't even play at Duke. So besides Duke, they'll play at Carolina, they'll play at NC State, and they'll play at Virginia later this year. That will be their opportunity to really prove and go out. And, if they can win the ACC title, they might have to win 2 of those 3. And that's going to be really difficult. It's a different kind of challenge than what the test they've been passing so far.
Ryan, what about the 2 traditional powers here, Duke and North Carolina? They're teams that we've discussed on a lot of these podcasts here. I know that Griggs is not a fan of either one of them this season, but your thoughts on these 2 profiles here that are, might be missing, the volume of good wins that we normally see from them.
Well, Duke has, let's take a look. Again, I look at the losses here, and pretty much all of Duke's and UNC's losses are to tier 1 opponents. So
exactly.
they've both got 4 road losses. And so that's very even in that respect. And then, they have, they each have some tier 1 wins, but one was versus Ohio State for UNC, and then you got 3 for Duke. So both of them beat Ohio State. So that evens out there. But again, the games versus Iowa look good, and then Xavier looked good. No bad losses for either of them. If we're going to do, again, as far as metrics go, it's really close. Duke, I think maybe just a little bit ahead.
Oh, yeah.
Just because, and maybe, I don't know. It's really close. UNC does have the win versus College of Charleston, which I'm not sure how big. It's a good win. But then a bunch of wins over other tier 2 teams. But the 3 tier 1 opponents for Duke kind of do it for me. At least that's what I feel like.
Yeah, I agree with that. And if you're trying to sell a team on the fact that they beat College of Charleston and that's their flagship win, they've got work to do.
But Greg, I think the sale is more on where's the bad, and there's no bad. The loss columns actually are almost identical on these 2 profiles, which is almost amazing. That if you look just on the loss side,
I will say that Duke did something this weekend that I had been beating them up for not doing, and I know Georgia Tech is terrible, but they went in and they won huge. Like they won the way that a tournament caliber team should win at Georgia Tech. So. They no longer have just one true road win at Boston College by a point. And to the point that you all made, like Iowa and Xavier are decent teams. And while those weren't true road wins, they were not at home either. If you're asking me who's better, at least on paper and probably on the court as well, I just think it's Duke.
Okay. Well, I think I would agree with that. But one other team I know you want to discuss is the Wolfpack, another team that's moving its way right on up these brackets lists, aren't they?
Yeah, I was worried about moving into the hospital where Terquavian Smith was going and looked like he might be done for the year, taken off the court on a stretcher 9 days ago in a loss at Chapel Hill. Didn't even miss a single game. Scored 17 in the win over Notre Dame last Tuesday, 16 last Saturday in the win over Wake. They're 3 games behind Clemson in the standings. Great chance to keep stockpiling wins this week. Homestand, Florida State and Georgia Tech. I have them as an 8 seed, and even more amazing, if possible, 6-1 this month, despite having 2 injured senior starters, Dusan Mahorcic and Jack Clark.
Yeah, and here's the upcoming schedule in the ACC. It's an interesting week for Vodtech. If Vodtech has a shot to get back into the tournament mix and within 51 net, you'd think they would. At Miami, hosting Virginia, this is a huge week for them.
This Pitt, North Carolina, I think that's a big one. For both of those teams.
And Miami at Clemson on Saturday is another big one here.
Also very big.
Florida State at Louisville.
Well, I do agree that Pitt's in the position right now. Pitt's in the position where every game is, as you point out, Greg's huge because I think they are just inside the bubble. But
Yeah.
slip-ups, even a loss to a tournament team, Griggs, in Chapel Hill, that knocks them out because there are plenty of teams that we've already talked about, whether it's the Oklahomas, the Penn States, even the Mississippi States of the world that will take their spot. They need to win these games.
Another team that, again, you had talked about is NC State. 4 of their next 5 games are landmines. Florida State, Georgia Tech, at Boston College, at Syracuse. So those are games that, any of those they lose, they are in big trouble.
Yeah, they've really got to win all 4 of them. That Syracuse game, that's what we saw tonight. Syracuse has life, especially when you play them in the Carrier Dome. So,
could you please tell them to give all their efforts in those 4 games and give up on the one game that's not a landmine there? And I'd be fine with that.
Let's jump over to the Big East here. And Salika, your Xavier Musketeers now part of a 3-way tie with Marquette and Providence for first place after you go to UConn and win, but then you couldn't follow it up with a win in Creighton.
This was one great half against UConn, and then really 3 subpar halves right here. They hung on for dear life against UConn while the Huskies made the run, but Creighton may have also given a little bit of an answer key on how to defend Xavier. We talk about Kalkbrenner and Baylor Shireman quite a lot. We don't talk about Ryan Nemhard for the Blue Jays very much. He, shall we say, diffused the boom on Saturday. He played some great defense on there. And if you look at Creighton last year, people forget Nemhard broke a finger against St. John's. He wasn't able to play the rest of the year. And had he been healthy in the tournament, I don't think Kansas survives the first weekend. So that's a testament to how well Creighton is playing. And as a puppet will say, they probably have the highest ceiling, and they certainly played up to it on Saturday.
Yeah, this was a preseason pick by a lot to win the conference. And Griggs, the Creighton here has been red hot now, 4 wins in a row.
Yeah, they only have 1 true road win. If they do not double that in their next game, they're in real trouble. But
yeah, and let's turn to one of the other teams that's tied for first place here, though. Rocco, the Providence Friars, and I get they're tied for first, but they didn't do much for themselves this week. Just beating what was it, Butler and DePaul, I think, this week, or
no, they won at Nova.
They won at Nova. I'm sorry.
Yeah, Nova was healthy for the first time all year. Justin Moore made the start for Villanova and played 31 minutes. So you got to assume he's ready to roll full speed. And Nova led most of the way, but Jared Bynum also came back for Providence. He missed the game earlier in the week, and he was the hero. I mean, I think I tweeted out, it's Jared Bynum Day in Philadelphia right before the Eagle game kicked off. Anyway, so Providence, I thought they showed a lot of character and toughness in that win. I'm expecting Villanova to be a lot better going forward, I'll add. And that was, just, again, another really tough team. They might not have the sexiest stats, but guys like Bynum and Ed Crosswell, Devin Carter, Bryce Hopkins, these are like Ed Cooley kind of guys. They're vets, they're experienced. They're going to win a lot of ball games. And they're going to be.
They're going to play Georgetown twice, so watch out for that one.
Yeah, well, Rocco, where would you have this Providence team right now? Because when you get to the meat of the resume as it is, they have 2 wins over tournament teams, and they both came at home.
They both came at home. Yeah, and that's a hole, right? Like they need to fill up that hole. But I think overall, just the mix of the other parts that are in there, there still are 4 other road wins that do mean something. And it's really just a comparison of teams like San Diego State, Duke, Providence. I put Providence above those 2, and they made it in as the last 6 seed. But I think they're like a 6 or a 7 pretty safely right now.
Salika is telling us that Villanova was still missing Jordan Longino with a bad hamstring for that game, so they were not quite fully 100% for that Providence game.
I'm starting to wonder if Villanova will ever be 100% this year.
I don't think so.
They certainly, no, they have.
Longino's been out for like 3 weeks.
Villanova was bad enough to lose to early season Oregon, so that should tell you everything you.
and Portland. And they lost to Portland too.
Yep.
Hytel, would you like to discuss the bottom of the Big East?
I mean, if you can just highlight, you don't even need to put up the thing. Just put circle the 1 on the conference record, because that's something we haven't seen in a couple of years. Ben Franklin famously declared that nothing is certain except death and taxes. I thought the thing he left out was Georgetown will lose a Big East game, but Last Tuesday, Capital One Arena, they finally proved that I'm not the jinx. Beat DePaul, first conference win in 693 days. Then went to the Garden, 9-point lead, 9 minutes left, and then St. John's blew any chances they had of a winning streak out the door. I'm heading out of town this week, so I'm not going to see how they do versus Creighton and UConn at home. I have them
gotta
just
guess how
outside the
they'll do.
bubble of the AC8.
Outside the bubble is. We might put
Was
them in
that
the
their
ACA.
first conference win since they won the conference?
Wow.
Yeah. Here's an upcoming schedule. Big week for UConn, actually. A pair of must-win road games at DePaul and at Georgetown. But the way they've been playing lately, Joby, this UConn team really does need these games. And
I mean, I remember when we were going, oh, who's number one, Purdue or Connecticut? Who's number one, Purdue or Connecticut? Those days are long past us now. But Connecticut at least built in that time a foundation. The Creighton wins all of a sudden looking better and better, as time goes on. And Iowa State gives you some stability along with an outstanding win. I don't care. Alabama's a 1 seed still. So Connecticut just, they're revealing themselves for what I think overall, you take the not so great lately, you take the really good early, and it all spits out into a white jersey that won't be protected come March if they play out the string. But I don't think that, if they go out and they lose to DePaul and Georgetown, okay, then that's different. They're not going to lose to DePaul and Georgetown, I predict.
Okay. The other big game this week, of course, Griggs, is Providence Xavier Wednesday night.
Yeah, that's a big one kind of for both teams. Not that it's needed to get inside the bubble or even on the first ballot. It's just big for a resume stabilizer. Xavier trying to become a protected seed, Nova trying to move up the seed list. I just wanted to say, if our friend Lee Del Vecchio is watching, if Connecticut loses to DePaul and Georgetown, I am personally revoking one of their banners, probably 2004.
Let's jump over to the Pac-12 and
Can we revoke 2011 instead?
Okay, we'll revoke 2011.
Titel, let me start with you and your team tied for first here. Your Arizona Wildcats picked up a pair of much needed road wins in Washington this weekend.
I have selectively stayed away from talking about them this year, but now that they are kicking butt, I feel ready to. So one of my favorite Stalika-isms is playing with their food, which they did for the first 60 minutes of their road trip up north. They only beat the Cougars by 5 Thursday and only had a 2-point lead over the Huskies at halftime on Saturday, and then devoured their food in the final 20 minutes, outscoring Washington 57-36, winning by 23. I cannot wait for the revenge game this week when the Ducks come to Tucson on Thursday. I have my guys even though their two best players are the big men, Tubelis and Ballo. The key to their success, I think, is Kirk Kriisa, the point guard, specifically his 3-point shooting. 3 losses, he's only shot 4 of 25 behind the arc, 16%. 19 wins, he's made 53 of 129, over 40% behind the arc. When he makes threes, they win.
Brian, I got to go to you. I pulled up your Ducks here on the right. You are an Oregon guy. I don't think this team is really anywhere close to the bubble right now, but at Arizona State, USC home, UCLA home for the next 4.
Win those 4.
You go 4-0. Is there still a road here?
You have 4 games. You got 4 games here. It's a team that's got 4 games right in front of them that if they win them, which they won't, if they win them, then everybody's gonna be like, well, here we go again. It's getting to February. Oregon's getting good. The only thing is, I know I've watched this team too many years. They seemingly, especially with this recent group of guys, they find a way. They find another way to lose to a team like Cal or the Beavers. And that ends any hope of an at-large. So, again, the thing is, especially for Arizona, they don't have to worry about Oregon being so much a landmine for them in terms of dropping down from a 1 or a 2 seed. As far as Arizona is concerned, they've got Oregon State, Cal, and Stanford, though, right after that they'd have to be concerned about. They need to obviously win all of those 3 if they're going to be talking about being a protected seed. But Oregon, I don't know. If they win these next 4 games, then sure, that's going to turn everybody's head. And then they got 5 games after that are versus teams that are just not going to. Again, and the teams they already lost to UC Irvine. They lost Utah Valley's. When I watched them, they looked okay, but really they're not. They're just not a good team. They're a whack team, and they're not good.
Well,
So Oregon, as always, was terrible in those early games, like they are every single season. They still somehow managed to win against Villanova. I'm not sure how that happened. But yeah, I mean that's where they're at. They're pretty much where they're at almost every single season.
Stalika, the team that had the awful week in this conference was Arizona State. While Arizona was sweeping their trip to Washington, Arizona State was getting swept, and this team, they completely shoot themselves in the foot this week.
This team was already on thin ice with the loss to Texas Southern. Not to mention they blew chances to beat UCLA, Arizona, and USC. You couple that with a pair of losses up in Washington, they're toast unless they can really win like 2 out of 3 road games in their final road trip of the year. And you cannot have any more slip-ups right here. There's the margin for error is gone.
Yeah, these next 6 are all must-wins for them. And then they got to do something in those last 3 games. And I don't know that they can. But Rocco, the story of the week, of course, was USC's win over UCLA. If Arizona State is falling out, this USC team is a team replacing them, are they not?
Well, effectively, sure, from a conference bid standpoint. But I thought that USC win, not only were they down big early, I actually watched the recording of the show on Hoops HD last week. You guys started the show talking about UCLA having a big lead, and then by the end of the show, you were talking about USC winning it. So there you go. But yeah, I thought that win did wonders for their profile. I think the bubble is pretty tight from like 9 down to the cut line, and for me, that put USC all the way up to the 9 line. Just really did numbers for a lot of their performance measurements. Obviously, they still have the Gulf Coast loss; they have to own that, but. Beyond that, it's a pretty solid team, and they're playing, with Victor, the 7-1 freshman phenom, and much different team today than they were back in November. So I think the Trojans are in good shape going forward.
And look at the remaining schedule. I mean, it's not, it probably is just full of Brian's landmines here because, other than the Arizona home game, you should win every one of these games, should you not?
That's the thing. Cal is a team that is a SWAC team in the Pac-12. And the Beavers are basically like a, Northeast-ish conference team. So there's basically 2 teams in that bottom tier of conferences that are essentially playing in the Pac-12 that you have to avoid loss to, or you're toast.
Here's the upcoming schedule. Maybe the Oregon-Arizona game is the best game on here because pretty weak week here in the Pac-12. But let's go. We got a couple of conferences.
Producing this show.
We're running low on time here. We've got a lot more to get to still. Joby, let me go quickly run over to the American here, where Houston. Found a way to go 2-0, but they really didn't deserve to.
Cincinnati had them too. They had them. I think the win at Central Florida. Central Florida is going to be playing in the NIT. It's those sort of teams that can give trouble, and you don't go, oh, the team's in disarray if Houston were to have lost that one. I actually think Houston would rather have had that Central Florida had a Central Florida loss than a Temple loss, but. Man, that Cincinnati game at home, the Cougars were on the ropes and Cincinnati kind of blew it more than Houston took it. And that game makes me start to go, is Houston hitting a wall right now? And if Houston takes a few more losses going forward, this team still can make a strong argument for a 1 seed. But man, just 1 or 2 more losses, and they don't just fall a seed line with these losses. It starts to fall. They start to fall multiple seed lines with each loss, barring it being Memphis. In the tournament or something. Memphis, you get a pass once, but everybody else, now that you've passed the at UCF game, there's nothing. There's nothing there.
I'd like to address Houston if I could.
Big triple digits.
Yeah. I think you see this. It's not uncommon, and you don't see it from everybody, but you see it from a lot of teams that kind of get, for lack of a better term, bored with their season. Now in the Big 12, I don't think you're getting bored with their seasons because of the rivalries and the stakes of the games and the showcases of the games. But if you're a Houston team that's constantly undermatched and you don't have to play well to win the games, and no game that you win really moves you forward, and instead it's just you're trying to avoid losing to go to so you don't fall, as opposed to chasing a rabbit to elevate yourself, I think teams get bored. It wouldn't shock me at all if they did drop a couple of games, maybe more than a couple between now and the end. But one of the things I'll say, and I'm kind of stealing a point that Rocco made a week ago, when the tournament starts, they're not going to care what seed they are.
Yeah,
This is a
Agreed.
dangerous team.
Yeah.
Agreed.
Let's see.
Well, the other thing, yeah, real quick, I just, I don't know how closely everybody watches the American. I had a chance to visit with a few of the coaches preseason, and Memphis and Houston obviously are the big dogs in the league by far. And a bunch of these middle teams like Cincinnati, UCF, Tulane, and others built their roster because it's such a physical league. It's a different style of play because of Houston and Memphis. That when they actually match up, like UCF and Temple and Cincinnati are going to give Houston problems. They built their entire team to try to beat Houston. But Houston's not going to run into that in the March Madness tournament. That's the key thing, I think.
Yeah, Titel, what about the Memphis Tigers?
The aforementioned big dog. It's been a rough week for the city of Memphis off the court, obviously with the video of the police officers beating a young man to death.
Yeah.
On the court, the Tigers took care of business, double-digit wins over SMU and Tulsa, just one game behind Houston in the standings, and they begin the revenge tour this week. They host a Tulane team who scored 96 against them on New Year's Day. They are a bit of a home court hero, all 5 losses away from home, but all 5 losses by 7 or less, so they prove they can hang with anybody. I have them as a 10 seed.
Winning against Alabama is really nice.
Yeah.
Auburn, wasn't it? Oh yeah, Auburn.
Yeah, Auburn. Yeah.
Yeah. Here's the upcoming schedule. Houston is going to be at Wichita and at Temple, trying to get a little revenge here on Sunday, while Memphis will be hosting Tulane, their only game this week. But let's jump over to Joby, your favorite conference, the Mountain West.
I see 6 Elite 8 teams here.
Okay, I'm muting the
market.
And what makes it worse is UNLV just snuck into the top 75 to boost all of their resumes by across the board.
UNLV is just inside my bubble.
It's ludicrous to say UNLV and Wisconsin are right next to each other.
I think we should just make this the West Regional.
Yeah, I mean,
Joby, seriously, this San Diego State team though picked up a pair of wins, including against a decent Utah State team this week.
Yeah, San Diego State's the one team that seems to have, in my opinion, a little credibility out there because they've been around. They have the strength. I hate them offensively, though. And we always say this about San Diego State, but they're going to have troubles getting baskets when they need it, when the time comes. However, defensively, we talked about the great Houston team. I think they have a lot of similarities defensively, not offensively, to Houston, in that they will be able to really show their abilities to shut down teams when they need to in a particular case. And I really like how they play on that side of the ball. In your face, a lot of pressure right on you, and they will grab rebounds. San Diego State, I think they don't have a very high ceiling in the tournament, but they will be in the tournament. And I think they will win this league and they will be wearing white entering the tournament.
Stalika, New Mexico only played one game this week. They won it as well. They're saying keeping pace up here, are they not?
Yeah, I think this was a New Mexico team that was also coming off of a tough loss at Nevada right here. Bit of a controversial flagrant late in the game that cost them that one right there. They do rebound against a tougher than expected Air Force squad right here. So the Lobos are at least keeping pace with San Diego State right here.
Yeah, I'll pull them up.
In trouble in that Air Force game.
And pull up them in Boise.
Air Force lost to A&M Commerce. So.
Okay. I'm gonna pull New Mexico and Titel, Boise State as well as Griggs asked for them. And what about this Boise team, Titel?
They blew a 6-point halftime lead in the 2-point overtime loss at New Mexico 10 days ago. Got back on track last week, double-digit home wins over Fresno and Colorado State, one game behind Joby's Aztecs in the standings. They get the road cupcake at Air Force Tuesday, and then the MWC Game of the Year at San Diego State on Friday night. The Broncos have been doing it with defense. 3 of their 5 losses this year by exactly 2 points. So they're in every game.
Yeah.
I have them as a 10 seed, and unless they fall apart down the stretch, this team is inside the bubble.
And this is a team that's actually benefited from what their opponents have done. We were talking about last week that they would lead the nation in tier 2A wins. 2 of those have actually moved into tier 1 with A&M and UNLV stepping up a bit here.
UNLV stepping up just a bit. Like you can't get closer to tier 2 and still be tier 1. This is what gives me pause about New Mexico. And I realize it's close, and I realize that they played each other and New Mexico did win. When you go down New Mexico's wins, it's like they sweat out Southern Utah and San Francisco, and well, they blew out San Jose. They have a lot, going to Wyoming and sweating. Whereas Boise, it just seems to me that they look more solid. And when you put the paper aside, and I realize that's not what we do when we evaluate who's getting selected and where they're seated, but if you ask me which team is better built to actually do something in the NCAA tournament, like maybe get beyond the round of 64, it's Boise. I like them more than New Mexico.
Are they playing a team that actually can breathe? Because if they can, I don't see either of them.
Yeah, that's a good point. Rocco, I want to bring up one other team here, and that's Utah State. And I keep seeing brackets out there where people are saying Utah State first 4 out, second 4 out, this 34 net. Explain it to me.
Yeah.
Explain to me because the Greek says I would rather have Utah State in the ACA because that's about where I see this profile when I look at it.
No, I mean, I can't speak for others. I can only speak for my work. And I'll say this: I haven't put Utah State in the field mainly because obviously they have a big hole there. They don't have a quad 1 win. They don't have a win.
Like a crater.
They don't have a what you call a WAB, a win over the bubble, right? So they got to get that. But in the Mountain West, they're going to get opportunities with San Diego State and with Boise and Nevada, maybe if they're a tournament team or not. We'll find out later in the year. But New Mexico at home, overall Utah State's just got to clean up their D. They have an awesome offense. It's electric. I mean, I love the way Ryan Odom runs his stuff. I think they're a lethal team. I think maybe outside of San Diego State, if they actually got in, they would have the second best chance to get a win in the tournament.
Wow.
They just bring a great offense. They don't play enough defense, but if you play like a Northwestern or somebody that can go cold, they could definitely beat them and beat them pretty handily.
But you've got to overcome the Weber State and SMU losses, and
that's the big thing right there.
You can't.
That's part of the reason why the Q1 hole is such a big problem on the win side, because you need the wins to outweigh the bad, and they don't have that yet.
And they're praying Oral Roberts doesn't lose games.
Oral Roberts won't lose games,
and they might not. But you don't want. Do you really want to be relying on
the Washington State game is not getting any better. I'm gonna tell you that.
The big games is coming up this week. Tomorrow night, San Diego State.
Big one. That is big.
Friday, Boise State and San Diego State. Also circle this New Mexico Utah State game coming up on Wednesday night. A tough road test for New Mexico. We just discussed Utah State. Real quick, one other conference. Stalika, let me start with you over in the West Coast Conference, where let me get to the scores instead of the upcoming schedule first here, where we see Gonzaga bounce back from their loss, picked up a win at Portland, although another game that, even though the final score looked pretty good, they struggled for a lot of that game.
Well, they struggled for a little bit of that game. I'll just leave it at that. But they needed a little bit of a breather, especially with St. Mary's walking a tightrope but managing to escape at BYU. So Gonzaga's margin for error is almost non-existent, at least as far as winning the regular season title in the WCC.
Right. And how about the St. Mary Gales title? Now I've won 10 games in a row, and the big one, first of the 2 big ones coming up this week.
Talk about escaping at BYU after the Zags did it, the Gales did it. Freshman Aiden Mahaney, the 16-foot turnaround jumper with under a second left to clinch the 1-point road win. They're one of 6 teams in the country with 0 conference losses. 10 wins in a row is the 3rd longest winning streak in the nation. I have them as a 5 seed, not a 2 seed, Joby. I agree. That's ridiculous. There's only 8 games left in the regular season, and they're ahead of the Zags in the standings. As long as they can split the season series with them next month, which I don't know if they can, they're going to be still the only team besides the Zags this century to win an outright WCC regular season title. They did it 11 years ago in 2012.
What do you
I concur,
now,
Titel, with your
that's
assessment. I do. I
Yeah.
concur. They're
when
fine.
you watch these teams play, Gonzaga's profile is undoubtedly better, largely because of what they did early in the year. But for the
Just straight
past
with
couple
schedule.
of weeks, St. Mary's has looked better,
Mhm.
like in present day.
Agreed.
I think they're
Well,
going
I
to.
agree.
They
Yes,
could split it with.
yes.
Yeah.
You're right. In present day, absolutely. The only issues they have is that loss to Washington, which,
Yeah.
I mean, Washington's all right and not that good. And then Loyola Marymount is the only really.
I am
the only
sorry,
loss that Gonzaga
Rocco.
has.
Wow.
So Loyola Marymount's in second place in the West Coast Conference right now. But I have both St. Mary's and Gonzaga as 3 seeds currently.
Well, Rocco, let me ask you about Loyola Marymount. Is this team with that Gonzaga win and with chances with St. Mary's and a road game at BYU, is there a path here for Loyola Marymount?
Yeah, I think they'll need at least they only have St. Mary's one more time. So
Right.
I think they need that to make it compelling. Maybe of course, a sweep of Gonzaga would be very compelling. But yeah, I think just because if you get both of the top dogs in this league, that's going to even raise more awareness. Of course, they have the nice supplemental wins against Nevada and Wake. Unfortunately, Wake's slipped a little bit the last week or two, but maybe Wake turns around and that will only help LMU. I think losing to Pacific and UC Riverside at home, that's not going away. So that's tough. And I do think these middling games, like your road trip to San Diego, your road trip to Santa Clara, those are tough games still for LMU to win. So it's a lot to ask, but they're playing with a ton of confidence, and they're a new team. I mean, they got greeted by a couple thousand people at the airport when they got back from the Gonzaga game, and that was like more people at the airport than at their actual games.
Yeah. That happens to me all the time. It's called the airport, and it's the people in front of me in the line at security.
Here's the upcoming games of the week. Loyola Marymount with an interesting test at BYU Thursday night, but the game of the week and the game of the season potentially so far, Gonzaga at St. Mary's Saturday night. Rocco, you're going to be there, right?
Yeah, I'll be there. Yep.
All right.
Okay, great. One other team to quickly
I do that one every year. That's an easy one.
To quickly discuss here, I'll just pull the profile up. Still in the top 25, Joby, is the Florida Atlantic Owls. College of Charleston, we've been discussing, had the loss this past week. They are gone, but this FAU team now has won 20 games in a row.
And there have been a few close calls here and there with, the Florida International game in a rivalry, crosstown rivalry game certainly comes to mind. But overall, they're taking care of business. They're doing what they need to do. It is so tough for a team like FAU, and they've passed, to their credit, they've passed their toughest in-conference test, in my opinion, with North Texas, with this North Texas sweep. The problem they have is any little loss hiccup comes back to haunt them. And UAB and Charlotte's Nets actually are not awful. So a road loss probably keeps them fine either way. And they do have at least one mulligan, maybe two. But for Florida Atlantic, I look for them to try to do a Wofford, a Buffalo, try to get into the top half of this bracket because they can cause a little problems. What they will need for that to happen to feel steady, because right now they are. If they ran the table, they are. But let's assume they lose one just because it's inevitable for somebody to do it. They need Florida to pick up the pace in the SEC. They need Florida to at least be in the discussion for a bit. If they have that, that will do a world of wonder because it gives credibility to the overall resume. And then you can start looking at the solid nets for Conference USA, which, as Rocco has pointed out in the past, is a top 10 conference in the net this year, which will weigh positively for the Owls' direction.
I think this is a big week for them with the two road games at Charlotte and UAB.
Easily
Yeah. Good, Brian.
I was going to say the only real big issue I could see for them in terms of landmines is the Texas San Antonio game. So all the other games Florida Atlantic's got left, I mean, they're in the Conference USA games. So
I can't.
USA, just tremendous season they've had this year.
Yeah,
I can't see them losing this pathetically bad UTSA team. No offense to San Antonio. We love the city of San Antonio, but this is not a good team this year.
Oh, the runners are terrible this year. Yeah.
And
Guys, on that note, that completes all the cups we want to go to. So, but before we pull the screen down, Titel, let me start with you on final thoughts, because you wanted to discuss a picture that I'm going to pull up here as we go to final thoughts.
So there's not a lot of things that surprise me anymore, but Clemson senior guard Brevin Galloway pulled off a stunner last week. He was in the hospital for a couple of days, emergency surgery to resolve a testicular injury. And rather than keep it to himself, he did the only thing that people can do in this NIL era, which is to sell t-shirts and hoodies about your unfortunate experience on your website. And one of them is just an image where he calls himself ballsy, but this is the one I like better, the Nutty Professor. And I got to tell you, Chad, I cannot wait for somebody to break their tailbone and release some limited edition boxers with Ass Man written across the back.
Oh, jeez, the Nutty Professor. I'm going to pull this down here. If I continue with final thoughts, Stalika.
I'm going to stick with Clemson, but this is going to be a little more PG rated. If you go back to the end of the game against Florida State, here is a lesson on how not to foul when up 3. To set the stage right here, Florida State was up 3. They end up fouling the Clemson with about 9.7 seconds left. The Tigers hit their free throws because they've got enough time. They foul Florida State, who in turn only hits 1 out of 2 shots. And Clemson had enough time to actually drive the floor, get fouled, score an old-fashioned 3-point play, and the Tigers end up escaping with a 1-point win. There is a reason why people say if you do want to foul, do it below 5 seconds, not at 9.7.
You know, we could have a long debate about this,
Yes.
but honestly, you know, when you are up and winning a game, the last thing you want to do is stop the clock and let the other team score with the clock stop, which is what you do when you foul up 3. I'm sorry, I'm completely on the do not foul up 3 bandwagon now. I'm sick and tired.
I understand the mixed opinions about it. I do.
But definitely don't do it with 9 seconds left. That's ridiculous.
The time has to expire in order for you to win. You need to be ahead, but the game also has to end. Anyway,
Brian, any other final thoughts from you?
Well, again, we talked about a lot of stuff. That this big West Coast game coming up, you got Oregon and Arizona, a revenge game for Arizona. You got, everything in the Pac-12 still left to be sorted out, and there's a lot of separation that's still left. So, there's teams have enough games that we're gonna have a lot of fun here over these next few weeks. That's the one thing I do know. The field does appear to be, at least at the time, pretty wide open. So that's nice.
Mm-hmm.
Every single team seems to have at least some sort of flaw. I don't see any team that's super huge, long, and dominant that you've had in years past. I definitely think that every team has some sort of a weakness.
I agree. I think it'll be a great tournament where we get there. Rocco.
Yeah, I'll just give a quick shout out to the Pacific Tigers, a team mostly overlooked in the preseason, picked last by virtually everybody in the WCC. Here we are approaching February, and they're 4-4 in the league, just basically ruined any hope Santa Clara had left of an at-large bid by winning at Santa Clara. Keelan Boone came over from Oklahoma State. He's finally starting to get into his rhythm. The coach Lennon Perry was playing 10 guys earlier this year. He's narrowed that sucker down to 6 dudes that are just playing really well together. I think they're going to knock more teams off. Their next game is against Pepperdine at home. Pepperdine has the nation's longest losing streak on the road, 21 in a row. So unless they snap that, Pacific's going to get over 500 in the WCC. And in general, I know those guys are working really hard over there to build something, and it's really good to see all the hard work paying off.
Looking a lot better than when they lost to Cal State East Bay earlier this season. Non-D1 loss there. Joby.
Titel, we share emails and information behind the scenes, and Titel had an excellent breakdown of people with the number of minutes played. Because of the COVID year, you're seeing a lot of all-time records being broken in minutes played, while the overall leader will not is at 5,700 and is not going to be caught. The race for number 2 is going to be very heated, especially one, from a Virginia perspective tonight, K.A. Clark became the all-time minutes leader in the ACC history, for instance. And you're going to see, you have Carr from Texas. You have a number of folks who are going to break that 5,000 minute mark and get probably into the mid 5,000s. It's going to be really interesting. And because you have 5-year terms for these guys, it's likely these records will stay, and be ensconced for a long time, because you're not going to see these 5-year full-time players have those opportunities. So it's going to be really interesting. We joke on a lot of these players. They've been there since Ewing and Sampson were playing against each other, but it's going to be it is kind of neat to see the consistency and some of these familiar faces. It gives fans the ability to see and latch on to teams and actually not have it's the exact opposite of the one and done phenomenon that you see that we've had over the last 10 years.
Yep. Greg, do you want to finish off the show, or can we just end it?
We could just well, I'll finish it off with a little bit of a preview of the Under the Radar show that we'll be doing Wednesday, and I'll reference particularly Titel's most recent bracket, but just something that I was kind of noticing. There's a lot of good teams that can play at a high level, and as I like to say, have a high ceiling from some of the under the radar leagues that just didn't quite win enough games out of conference, or they came close in the case of Kent State to getting some really big wins, but didn't get any, or they did get some big wins, but they've also kind of stubbed their toes in conference. And when you look at teams like Kent State and Oral Roberts on the 12 line, and even Santa Barbara on the 13 line, and Liberty, Marshall, who has been kind of all over the place but capable of playing really well, VCU, who I don't know what the hell they did their last time out, but they're really good. The reason the protected seeds are important, and not just maybe even to get above the 4 line, the difference between the 3 line and the 5 line as far as the quality of opponent you might have to play in the round of 64 is enormous. So much so that sometimes when you look at the 9 or 10 line, if you're if you're a 4 or 5 seed and you look at your opponent in the round of 64, you might look at the teams on the 9 or 10 and think, my God, I wish we were playing them instead. So when we talk about the top of the bracket, when we do these bracket breakdowns, that might be an important thing to get high up on the seed list to sort of avoid what might be a very hard round of 64 game in the 12 and 13. If you want to hear more about those teams, Chad, what can they do? Listen to us on Wednesday.
Okay, listen to us on Wednesday. All right. On that note, I've completely lost here. Okay, on the note, I want to thank everybody for joining us. On behalf of David Griggs and John Titel up here, Joby Fortson now in the center square, John Salika, Rocco Miller from Bracketeer.org and his sides, Brian Black down on the bottom row. I'm Chad Sherwood. Thanks for joining us. We'll be back, as you know, on Wednesday night. Talk to you again real soon.
I thought that was Alf in the center square.